So.
Natural selection. This was Darwin's theory. And by the way, if you get this on the test, which is Friday, you have to write an essay about how evolution by natural selection works and name some of the evidence that Darwin saw that convinced him that it is correct. So you can talk about finches, you can talk about tortoises, you can even talk about giraffe necks and that sort of thing.
And the other essay was about this?
The other essay was about this.
Yeah.
With the RNA DNA.
That's the transcription translation, yeah. So, how does evolution work by natural selection? Well, there's 4 parts to it. 4 parts you need to know. Part 1 is called variation. Variation means that not all organisms are born the same. In this sample population they have each circle represents an organism, and some organisms are light colored and some organisms are dark colored. That's an example of variation. Some are medium. So organisms vary. Do we have variation here in this class?
Yes.
Yeah.
Some people have dark colored hair, some people have light colored hair. Some people have darker eyes, some people have lighter eyes. Some people have darker skin, some people have lighter skin. Some people are tall, some people are short. Some people got long necks, some people got short necks. Some people are incredibly athletic, others are not. Some people are incredibly intelligent, others are not. I'm kidding, you're all incredibly intelligent and athletic and good looking.
Thank you.
Anyway, we call that variation. Variation is having an abundance of, there's a bunch of different types. That's one thing Darwin saw in populations. And I don't think anyone would argue that populations have variation. Number 2 is what we call overproduction.
Rabbits.
More organisms are born than can possibly survive. More organisms are born than can possibly survive. Yes?
Would this be like his major points?
These are his major points of natural selection, yeah. Did you already write it once?
Or I looked at it, I got confused. That's nice.
Okay, gotcha. The major points of evolution, overproduction. I mean, how many acorns does an oak tree drop?
That's it.
Thousands.
All it takes is one.
All you need is one to grow into a new oak tree to replace the oak tree. It can't possibly be that every acorn grows into an oak tree, or we'd be overrun with oak trees in a matter of 1 or 2 generations.
Would be a good thing, though.
Might be a good thing.
Like oak trees.
It'd be a good thing for things that like oak trees.
Like me.
It'd be a bad thing for grasses that can't live in oak tree shade.
We'll be people of the trees, living trees.
Okay,
Right?
alright.
Like Tarzan.
Yeah.
Tree house.
Oh. So there's an overproduction. There's more born than can possibly survive. So some have to die. That's just one of the laws of nature, as Darwin saw
Isn't
it.
that like?
And I don't think anyone would argue with that either. Yes.
Isn't that why people like hunt?
That's
What?
pulling
Yes.
the population.
Well, yeah. Hunting, or you not even think of people hunting, animals hunting.
People hunting.
Yeah, people do that.
Well, you don't have to think of
In fantasy.
people hunting.
Oh.
It's like a cat with mice.
Animals hunt also. Not hunting, people.
Yeah.
The most dangerous game.
I said,
Don't move, Lucy.
No, it's just an extreme sport.
Oh yeah.
So, animals hunt, people hunt. There's all kinds of hunting going on out there. There's more born than could possibly survive. And so, number 3 is called differential survival.
Different environments.
No, what this is saying is that some variations have a better chance of surviving than other variations. And this was called, not by Darwin, but by others, it was called survival of the fittest. Darwin never used that phrase, but other people did to describe what Darwin was trying to talk about. So some of the variations survive and some of them die. Which ones survive? The fittest ones survive. Darwin did use the word fit a lot in his book. If something was fit, that meant it was born with all the things it needed to survive. If something was unfit, that means it was born not able to survive. Maybe it was the wrong color, or didn't blend in enough, or its neck wasn't long enough, and it died. Yes.
So, can dominant and recessive traits also be related to survival? Like,
Absolutely. So, remember, tall was dominant to short in plants.
but if the tall ones almost all died out,
So if there was some situation where you needed to be short, then the short ones would survive and the tall ones would die out. If there was a situation where you needed to be tall, the tall ones would survive and the short ones would die out. So there's the genes allow the organisms to have some variation.
so you could have like a couple of tall ones that were like resistant or something. They could be recessive.
Well, in our plants, tall was dominant and short was recessive. In the pea plants, that was dominant. But you could have that one as tall, but it has a short gene, so it could possibly have short kids. And you might want short kids at some point if the conditions change, that where short is favored and tall is not. So it's probably good to have those genes still in there, even though they're not expressed. Does that make sense?
Yes.
Gigi, you okay with the thing?
Yeah, hold up, it just fell off the thing.
Uh-oh, spaghettios. Yeah.
So like, if all the short plants started to survive, could like short become dominant?
It doesn't become dominant, but it can become it can become highly present in the population where most of the individuals are short. Absolutely. So in this example they show us, you see there's variation. There's light and medium and dark colored organisms, and the light ones are dying out. That one died, those died. Only the dark ones are surviving. And they survive, and when they survive, they reproduce. And they tend to have kids that look like them. And that's the fourth part. It's called heritability. Heritability means you inherit your traits from your parents. If your parents were dark colored, then it's likely that you'll tend to be darker colored. There is some variation. Dark colored parents could have a bunch of kids, and some of the kids might be a little lighter colored than the parents, and some of them might be a little darker colored than the parents, but they're all probably pretty dark colored because the parents were dark colored. They try to show that here. These ones survived and tended to have kids that are similar to them. And pretty soon, if you look at the population over time, the population is darker than it used to be because the light ones died out and the dark ones made it. You see what I'm saying?
Mm-hmm.
Know what I mean?
Yeah.
This is what Darwin. This is it. These are the main points of natural selection. Natural selection explains how evolution works. Let's use, instead of the example of colored circles, let's use giraffes. At one point, 50 million years ago, giraffes didn't have such long necks. They were shorter neck creatures. Look at the little cute short necked giraffe. I want one. So there was a population of these organisms, and some had longer necks than others, some had shorter necks. And the ones with the shorter necks, they died out. They couldn't reach the food that was up on the trees. So they died out. The ones that were left tended to have longer necks and mated with one another and produced another generation. And that generation had mostly long necks, maybe a few short necks in there, just because of the normal variation from mutations and such that comes about when you're copying DNA and making kids. But if they did happen to be born short, they died too.
Are there any more short-necked giraffes?
No,
Could it be possible for there to be a short-necked giraffe?
probably could be. But if you keep eliminating the short ones because they don't get enough food, and only the tall ones survive, then over the time, the entire population is going to be tall. Keep eliminating the short ones. And if you look at the original population compared to a population much later, you see that the population has changed. That's evolution. Evolution by natural selection. This is what the giraffe ancestor looked like, by the way. A Paleotragus. It was around about 30 million years ago. Much shorter neck, much shorter legs than today's giraffes. And you won't find any fossils of a giraffe that looks like this 30 million years ago. They didn't exist. These things only came about recently. The modern giraffe fossil is only found going back about 5 million years or so. They didn't exist. They evolved to have these longer and longer necks. Why did they evolve longer necks? Scientists think that the area where they were living went from forest to grassland. And the plants on the floor, they just ran out. And have y'all ever seen an African savanna? What it kind of looks like there? There's not much to eat on the ground. And so they kind of slowly ran out of food on the ground over millions of years and had to change and adapt. Be able to reach the food in the trees. How rapid does the change in neck length have to be to get from a neck that's about 2 feet long to a neck that's about 8 feet long?
Pretty quick.
Kind of like the dinosaurs one.
Yeah, how rapid is that? I'll tell you, you can do this with some simple math. Do y'all know how big a millimeter is? A millimeter is about the distance between my thumb and forefinger right there. It's the width of a dime. So to get a neck to go from that to that, you would have to increase by a millimeter every 1,000 years.
It's fast.
To me, it doesn't seem that fast.
Yeah.
Well, compared to the dinosaurs one.
Oh, did we already talk about the dinosaur? 1,000 years in that much. That's all you got to increase to get from there to there in 10 million years. Just by that much every 1,000 years. It would not shock me if a neck got that much longer in 1,000 years. I wouldn't even notice it probably. And that's the thing. The changes are usually pretty slow. It takes thousands of millions of years to increase significant amounts. One of the problems people have with Darwin's theory is they don't have a good grasp of how old the Earth is. Because we have such short lives compared to the age of our planet, it's hard for us to fathom how long this thing has been here that we live on. Where's my Earth globe? Oh, it's in the back. That's been around for a long time. There's lots of time for evolutionary change. You want to see video footage?
Heck yeah.
Enable all, not recommended, but you know what? I'm going to do it anyway. I kind of live on the edge. This is your last test before the final. No, we don't have a final. We have a project.
Can I
Are
get
your
this to you?
project? Are you ready to go with the project?
You got the point.
We'll talk more about it in a minute.
Darwin's theory of natural
We are having
selection
technical
describes how,
difficulties.
if given enough time, a population that would result in the appearance of a new species. The theory of natural selection describes 4 principles that explain how this can occur: variation, heritability, overproduction, and reproduction. Variation is the principle that explains how individuals in a population differ from one another. Heritability is the principle that explains how variations are inherited from parents. Overproduction is the principle that explains how populations produce more offspring than can survive. Reproductive advantage is the principle that explains that some variations allow the organism that possesses them to have more offspring than the organism that does not possess them.
That was so bad. I apologize. Let's see if this one's any better.
The theory of evolution was developed by Charles Darwin and published in his book On the Origin of Species. He explained that natural selection is the process behind evolution. Charles Darwin developed his theories after his adventures upon the HMS Beagle. In his travels, he observed that creatures found on the islands he visited were similar to ones found on the mainland, but appeared to be slightly different. It wasn't until he returned home that he came to the conclusion that species are specially modified to their environments, and that's why they differ. He developed 4 conditions explaining why this happens. Darwin's theory of natural selection by descent with modification is testable and observable fact. Experiments have been conducted in the wild and in labs. Let's dive deeper into Darwin's 4 conditions. Condition number 1. Individuals within a population differ. There are features that differ within populations of the same animal. In our case, the feature that varies between our giraffes is neck length. Some giraffes were born with long necks, some were born with short necks. Condition number 2. The differences are, at least in part, passed from parents to offspring. Darwin's descent with modification is the idea that offspring are fairly similar to their parents with some genetic differences. Condition number 3. Some individuals are more successful at surviving and reproducing than others. In the case of our giraffes, the long-necked individual did not acquire its neck by stretching to grab the leaves. Instead, individuals within the population were born with a neck length that was longer than others. Because a longer neck allowed them to reach the food that was otherwise unattainable, it gave them an advantage. Condition number 4. The successful individuals succeed because of variant traits they have inherited and will pass on to their offspring. Giraffes with the longer neck advantage are in better health and able to pass this feature to their offspring. Because this trait is more successful than shorter necks, more individuals in the population have it. Over time, this process can result in populations that specialize for particular environments and may eventually result in emergence of new species. In other words, natural selection is an important process, though not the only process, by which evolution takes place within a population of organisms.
One thing to keep in mind that Darwin talked about a lot, you don't have to die to be affected by a short neck. Maybe you just don't get quite as much food, and so you don't have quite as many kids. If the long-necked giraffes are having more kids than the short-necked giraffe, eventually the population is going to have longer necks. So you don't necessarily have to die because you have a short neck. You just have to have less kids than the others. And eventually you'll get overtaken. The short-necked ones will disappear from the population, not having nearly as many kids. Let's talk about the peppered moth. You ever heard of the peppered moth?
No, sir.
This is a famous example of evolution happening in a time period where we can easily see it happening. We call it microevolution when organisms change, but they don't form new species. Change within a species. So there's this type of moth, it's called the peppered moth. And this is a dark peppered moth, and that's a light peppered moth. Did y'all see that one there? The light peppered moth blends in really well on this tree, and the dark peppered moth stands out pretty well because it's dark and the bark is white. And if you were a bird, you might eat the dark one there because it's easier to see. You might not see the white one. Scientists noticed, they started studying this moth in the early 1800s in England. And they counted how many moths were white and how many moths were dark. And they found that like 98% of moths were light. The dark one was a rarity. Because the dark one, when it landed on the white tree bark, it would get eaten.
So why wouldn't it just land on a dark?
Well, there are some dark places it could hide and it could survive. And so there was a small percentage of them. But most of the trees were white, so most of the moths were white. So, what happened was in this area where they were studying these things, a bunch of factories moved in nearby and started producing a lot of smoke and soot, which killed the lichens on the trees and caused the trees to turn black. And all of a sudden, the white ones were getting eaten and the black ones were surviving. And just in a matter of a few years, the population completely did a change, where almost all the moths were black, and almost all the white ones were gone. It was something like 95% of the population was black, and only 5% was white, where it was 98% white just a few years before. That's quick evolution, happening in just a matter of a few years in a person's lifetime where you can see it happening. And then the government finally stepped in and said, hey, y'all can't release all this pollution and kill all our trees and blacken, have soot everywhere. Y'all need to put some filters over your smokestacks and take out all that pollution. So they did, and guess what happened with the moth population? Came back. Flip-flopped again and it's back the other way now. Isn't that cool? It's a cool example of what we call microevolution. Now, it didn't form a new species. It's still a peppered moth. But the changes happen within the species. That's what they call it, microevolution. If it forms completely new species, then it's macroevolution. Yeah.
So, in a reference to the moth's lifetime, would it be considered longer than usual? Would it be considered a little longer than what humans would think it would be?
A moth's lifetime?
I mean, like, if you measured the time and the lifetime of the animals, like compared to
because moths have a short lifespan. So, yeah, they only live a few, I don't know how long those moths live, but they reproduce like every year. So a generation for a moth is a year or maybe even less, and a generation for a human is 20-some years. So maybe if you gave humans that many generations, they could change that quickly. But there would have to be something causing the change, like the change in the tree color was causing. Can you see the light moth there? There it is. Huh? Blends in pretty good, doesn't it? The bird would snatch that one right up and not even see that one. Peppered moth. Now here's an example of what we call macroevolution. We know through looking at fossils that horses changed from looking like that to looking like that. Over 50 million years it took. Horses got bigger. The biggest horses 50 million years ago were the size of a small dog. Oh, horse. Wouldn't that be cute to have? They ran around in the bushes and in the woods, hiding amongst the trees. They did just fine. Until the trees disappeared. The area where they were found went from forest to grassland. And if you're a little tiny, you don't do so well in a grassland. You can't even see above the grass. So you got to get bigger. The small ones died, the bigger ones survived, and pretty soon they were above the grass where they could see. Of course, if you can see, things can see you, and it would help you to get even bigger so you can fight off anything trying to eat you. A little jaguar or something can't eat a big horse, but it could eat something little. So you would be at an advantage if you were bigger. Yeah.
What's the difference between microevolution and macroevolution?
So microevolution is something, these things are still peppered moths, even though they change color. So it's a change within a species. It would be like if humans, all of a sudden, all humans got dark hair or something like that. We haven't seen a change like that in humans, but we'd still be humans, just we'd all have dark hair. Well, these are still moths. These are still peppered moths. They're that species, but they change completely what color they were. This, when we look at this, macroevolution. This is called a Heritability. It's not a horse. It changed into a different species over time. That's macroevolution. Macro means big, micro means small.
Small change, big change.
Exactly, small changes versus big changes. And we can actually see Gracie, we can see many different species along the way, leading up to the modern day horse. Modern day horse has only been around for about 2 or 3 million years.
That's still a long time though.
Still a long time compared to us. Humans have only been around 200,000 years. That's as far back as we go. You go back longer than 200,000 years ago, there are no human fossils
Or that we know of.
that we found. There are things a lot like humans. There are Neanderthals. You ever heard of them? There are Homo habilis. There are Homo erectus. We'll learn about all these. We do a whole chapter on human evolution. It's a great chapter. It's very interesting.
Do their hoof-like formation?
Yes, their hoof change. These Heritability used to have toes. Used to have 4 toes down here. And now it's just a hoof. They lost these toes as they got bigger. The teeth changed because they started eating different stuff.
What they started eating?
I guess they went to more to grasses than, I don't know what they were eating before. It's a good question. I'm not an expert on horse evolution, so I don't know. You want to see video footage?
Yeah.
Sure.
Video footage of natural selection at work.
Charles Darwin was a famous scientist in the 1800s. He was famous because he came up with an idea that changed the way we think about life on Earth forever. The theory of evolution. Darwin loved animals and studied them all of his life. In 1831, he went on an exciting voyage aboard the ship HMS Beagle. The Beagle visited the coastal islands of South America and Australia, where Darwin observed and collected a wide range of weird and wonderful plants and animals. When he got back to England, he analysed his collection closely. That was when his ideas about evolution started to form. Darwin had found around 15 different species of finch when he was on the Galapagos Islands. He noticed that the birds were similar to other finches in lots of ways, but their beaks were all different shapes. Darwin looked into it further. He realised that the different beaks matched the type of food available on each island. The finches who ate insects had skinny, pointed beaks, so they could pick them up better. And those that ate hard fruits had beaks that were sharp, so they could get through the skin. Darwin decided that there was only one way that this could have happened. the birds must have adapted to their environment over time. This led him to another idea, which he called the survival of the fittest. In any environment, plants and animals from the same species show natural variation in their physical characteristics, such as neck length in giraffes. Darwin suggested that those plants and animals best suited to their environment are more likely to survive and pass on their characteristics to their offspring. Over a long period of time, the characteristics of the surviving members of the species will come to predominate. Confused? Take the peppered moth. In London in the early 1800s, 98% of peppered moths had light-coloured bodies. Only 2% were dark. The light moths were very happy because they were the same colour as the trees, which meant that they could easily hide from hungry birds. The dark peppered moths were easy to see and, well, eat. Then came the factories and the smoke of the Industrial Revolution. Many trees turned black with soot, and suddenly it was the dark moths who were able to survive better in their environment. By 1895, the dark peppered moths made up 95% of the population. That's quite a turnaround. The process of natural selection usually takes much longer, but this is a good example of how it works. What about us humans? Good question. Darwin went on to suggest that humans share a common ancestor with modern apes. This was controversial because it went against the religious beliefs of many people. Darwin's theory of evolution by natural selection had a great impact on the world. Today, it is widely accepted as our best scientific explanation of how life on Earth works.
Very cool. All right. So we actually have 2 days on this section. So I want you to read it and learn it. And tomorrow I'll finish it. I'll talk about some other stuff. But you can stop filming now too. I want to talk before